What's up guys? My previous video on enmeshment seemed to have struck a chord with our viewers, and I thought it would be a good idea to elaborate more on codependency roles as they specifically relate to addiction. Just a quick shout out to the My Rehab group of dual diagnosis addiction centers who have sponsored this video. So let's get into it. There are generally 7 types of codependency roles. Let's take a quick overview of each of the first 5 as part of this 2-part series. Number 1, the rescuer. Initially, family members tend to exhibit understanding and compassion when faced with a loved one that might be struggling with an addiction problem. This is often because they relate or identify with the struggle that may have seemed to trigger the escalation in the person's substance abuse. So these triggers could include something like a divorce, a loss of some kind, retrenchment, or some other circumstantial issue. A family member might feel that they need to rescue the person with the addiction from the consequences of their behavior. Rescuing may play out in different ways. The family member may lie or cover up for the addicted person, create a financial safety net, or try and resolve conflict in relationships on their behalf. The rescuer's objective, in a way, is to try and minimize the consequences of their behavior. The problem here is that rescuing a person from these consequences makes it easier for the person with addiction to go on repeating their destructive behavior. Number 2, the blamer. After a while of covering up for or saving the addicted person from the consequences of their actions, the family member might start realizing that their loved one isn't changing. The rescuer then starts becoming resentful. They often consider enough time to have passed since the trigger and start realizing that rescuing may not be the answer. The next step is then often to move on to blaming. The family member starts to blame the person for things going wrong in and outside of the house. Some examples might include blaming them for overdue bills, conflict in the family, children's school difficulties, or other issues that are acting as stressors within the family dynamic. The function of this might be to get the person with the addiction issue to recognize and realize the impact of their addiction on the people around them. Unfortunately, this often might create a sense of guilt and shame, which could lead the person to want to use substances to suppress these feelings or avoid taking responsibility for them. Other than that, it can also potentially cause resentment, which can lead the person with the addiction issues to disconnect and use substances almost out of spite. Number 3, the controller. After a while, the family member recognizes that neither rescuing or blaming serves as a solution to their loved one's addiction, and they might move on to controlling. They take the mindset in that if the person is not going to stop by themselves, they will try and control circumstances as far as possible. This means the family member may, for instance, buy the addicted person a 6-pack of beer, but tell the person they should ration it and only have 2 a night. This also goes for family members buying the addicted person's drugs or medication. They might hide it and dispense it for the addicted loved one. The issue with this is that often the addicted person would play along and agree to stick to the agreed upon quantities, but behind the scenes they have their own stash of the substance someplace else. So they'll get to effectively use their substance while having their loved one convinced that they are controlling things. When the family member realizes that they are actually using in addition to what was agreed upon, there's often a huge break in trust, and they might feel a sense of betrayal and as though they may have been made a fool of. Number 4, the joiner. Over time, the family member may become so tired of fighting that they adopt a belief, if you can't beat them, join them. This doesn't happen for every family member, but for some, they might start joining the person in their drinking or using habits. The function may be to try and figure out what the draw is, or to try and mimic or model to the other person how unattractive their behavior might be, or again how it impacts on those around them, almost trying to put themselves into the shoes of the family member. The difficulty here is that the addicted person is often oblivious and just views their behavior as being condoned or finally accepted. Number 5, the enabler. Over a certain period of time, the family member gives up on the joining process and becomes extremely despondent, and a deep sense of hopelessness takes hold. Generally in this stage, family members tend to give up and they stop fighting, nagging, or begging. At this time, they conform to this new way of living and work on trying to survive, often then letting the addicted person almost live their own life and make their own decisions. They only take responsibility over the essential things such as finances, children, and household duties. They often also try and disconnect from their emotions as to try and cope as best as they can. This often leaves the addicted person to do as they please, and they often end up perceiving themselves as having been rejected or abandoned by the family, which fuels their need for the substance more. Others, however, take the stance that their family has finally accepted their lifestyle and that they have won the battle, which also leads them to continue their drinking or using. So that's a wrap for part 1 of this 2-part video on codependency. If you guys have any questions, please post them in the comments and I'll see if we can answer them in another video for you guys. Take care, everyone.